Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I'm so excited because I just found a new opening trap in Caro Kaan Defense. So I wanted to make a video for you guys, even though it's a secret. So probably I'm gonna use this trick in my own games. But I wanted to share with you guys and show you this idea because I know that these days Caro Kaan Defense is everywhere, and especially this line that I want to show you guys, it's really popular. So I want you to learn this trick and use it in your own games. And notice that you need to play according to the move orders, because if you change the move orders, it doesn't work. So let's get started. Okay, so you're playing as white, and as you know, Caro Kaan Defense happens after e4 and c6. And by the way, how did I find this trap? So basically I was looking at databases and trying to find new ideas in Caro Kaan Defense, and I found this game, which is between Maruzini Marizi and Cruz. And Marizi, his rating is 2500, so I believe he is a GM, and his opponent was about 2400, as you can see. Okay, let's see the game. So you play e4, c6, this is Caro Kaan Defense, and you go for d4, d5, and then you should protect your pawn. So you move your knight to c3, d takes e4, knight takes e4, and here black has three different ways to continue: bishop f5 and knight d7, which are traditional way to play as black. But recently this move knight f6 actually became popular, and a lot of even grandmasters, I have seen 2700 grandmasters playing this line knight f6. So what can you do in order to win against this opening? Guys, focus and learn these tricks because you can get a lot of points in this opening. Okay, so here you take the knight takes f6, check. He has to take. They can play g takes f6. I will show this line probably later on in my next videos, but e takes f6 is the one which is more popular. And the reason is, after e takes f6, black wants to open up the bishop, so black wants to castle as soon as possible. As opposed to g takes f6, this is a little bit tricky because your pawn structure is not as great as the other one, and you have an isolated pawn on h7. So e takes f6 is more popular. Okay, after e takes f6, I want you guys to play c3. Why c3? Okay, I'm gonna explain you the line. Why? Because I think you should not memorize the moves in the opening. You should understand the moves. You should know the reasons behind each move. Because if you start memorizing bunch of moves, what if your opponent just play a3 or h3 or whatever the move is, right? And you're out of your preparation or out of theory. So I want you to know each move with like the reason behind it and also the plans behind it. Anyway, so you play c3 here. Why? Because your idea is to play bishop d3, but bishop d3 is not possible here because black can take the pawn on d4, and you don't have a good discovery check here. I mean, if the pawn wasn't here, let's say if the pawn was on c7, then you could play bishop b5 check and you could win the queen, but unfortunately the pawn is on c6, so you can't go for a discover check, and white is just losing because white is down a pawn and you lost your central pawn. So instead of bishop d3, you push the pawn to c3 to protect your pawn, and you get ready to move your bishop to d3. So you play c3, black usually moves the bishop to d6, you play bishop d3, black castle, and here is an important move which you need to remember, queen c2. Why? Because you make this battery so you can take the pawn on h7. So black can push this pawn to h6 or g6, but black usually checks here on e8. Why? Because the rook gets to the game with tempo, and also the rook controls the open file, the only open file in the game. So after rook e8 check, you need to play knight e2. This is also another important move. You play knight e2, you block the rook, and now your threat is to take the pawn on h7. Okay, so in this position, black usually pushes the pawn to g6 to block your bishop. But what can you do now? You need to bring another piece to the attack. You push your pawn to h4. Very nice move, h4. Why? Your idea is to play h5 to attack this pawn. If the pawn takes you, then you're going to take on h7. So you want to open the diagonal for yourself. But also, in some ways, you can get your rook to the game. So imagine if you can get, for example, something like knight d7, h5, and if you can get this position, you have a nice open file for your rook, and you can create some sort of attacks, you know, against the king. Maybe you can even sacrifice, or you can double up your rooks along the h file, so you can go for a checkmate. So this is your idea. So that's why after h4, black plays bishop e6, and if you play h5, black wants to play f5. Why? Because he wants to block your bishop, right? So here is the moments that you need to also remember. So in this position, you can set up a trap for black, which white did in this position, and black fell into it. So you play queen d2. Very sneaky move, I would say. Why? You're gonna see. You're gonna see, guys. So black in this position played knight d7. Now, h takes g6, f takes g6, because if the pawn on h takes g6, now you can play queen h6 with the idea queen h8 checkmate, and white is more comfortable in this position. Okay, so let's go back. So in the game, black took with the f pawn, f takes g6, right? Okay, I want you guys to pause this video and find the best move for white. How can white continue his attack on the king side? Yes, the best move here for white is to take the pawn on h7. Beautiful move. Here, black played knight f6, but if black accepts the sacrifice, you can play queen h6 check. As you can see, the evaluation bar is jumping up. So you play queen h6 check. The king has just one square here, which is g8, right? And now you take the pawn with check. The king is in check, so the king has to move either to f8 or to h8, right? So let's say the king goes to f8 first. If the king goes to f8, you play bishop h6 check. King has one square here, king e7, and then you're going to move the bishop back to g5, and we have a nice skewer here. Right? So let's say if the knight goes to f6, you can easily take the knight, or even better, you can throw a check on g7 first to force the bishop to move to f7, and now you can take the knight. Why? Because if the king goes to d7, after winning the queen, you can even win an extra bishop. Right? And if the king moves to e6 here, you can simply play bishop c4 with the same sequences. So for example, let's say if here you can easily take the rook, take the queen, he takes you with the rook, and then you can win the bishop. So in this position, you're up a queen, and this is an easy win for white. Okay, let's go back and see what happens if black moves the king to h8 instead of f8. Remember this position? We analyzed this move, king f8, right? Now I want to show you how to play against king h8. So if the king goes to h8, you need to play bishop g5, attacking the queen. Guys, I want you to remember this move, bishop g5. You know why? Because this is a typical move. It means all the grandmasters know such moves in chess, you know. Notice that the king is trapped in the corner, so we need to add another attacker. The queen cannot checkmate the king by herself. We need some help. That's why the bishop gets into the game. So the bishop is attacking the queen, but also we want to play bishop f6 if we can remove these two pieces. Another way here to play, you will see, okay, I'm not gonna spoil it. So here, let's say if the rook goes to e7, now white has a beautiful move in this position. Guys, if you can find this move, I think you should be around 1800, because this is not an easy move. So what is the best move here for white? You can basically evaluate your skills. What's the best move for white? So the best move here for white is to move the king. So you can either play king d2, or you have a better move, castle, long castle. Not because the king is in a safe square, but because a rook gets into the game. We want to move the rook to h1 and checkmate this king. So imagine if the queen, for example, moves to g8, you can simply check on h1, and after rook h7, you can take the rook, queen takes, and then you're going to pick up the bishop on e6. You're attacking the bishop and the knight, and the bishop, let's say, moves. You can take the pawn on f5, and this position is winning for you. Why? Because you're up a pawn and the king is exposed, and this is an easy position for you. I mean, the king is really weak and vulnerable here. Okay, but in the game, black didn't accept the gambit. I mean, black didn't accept the sacrifice. So in this position, after rook takes h7, black here played knight f6. Black didn't take the rook. And here, white played rook h6. So white is attacking the pawn, right? So black played bishop f7. But what happens if, for example, black moves the king to g7? We're going to play the same thing. We're going to play queen g5. The idea is to put pressure on g6, which is the weakest pawn in this position, right? Okay, so in the game, he played bishop f7. White moved the queen towards the king side. Queen g5. The idea is to attack this pawn. Black played bishop f8. And after bishop f8, white took on g6. But let's imagine that black, instead of moving the bishop back, black moves the king to g7 to protect this pawn on g6. Now, what should white play in this position? Notice that the pawn on g6 is pinned, so it means we can pick up this free pawn on f5 and put more pressure on g6. Unfortunately for black, he cannot protect the pawn. So he played queen e7. Let's say if black plays queen e7, black is threatening checkmate. So black is one move away from checkmating the king. But here we can take the pawn with check. White starts the attack. Bishop takes, queen takes, king h8, and now we can protect our knight. So for example, we can move the bishop to d3. And again, white is up a pawn with a better position. So for example, let's say if black wants to exchange the queens, do we want to exchange the queens? No, never. Why? Because your opponent king is exposed. You don't want to exchange the queens, because that way your opponent is relaxed. He doesn't need to worry about the attacks, right? So you want to keep the queens on the board, because with the queens, you can attack the king easier. And that's why in this position, you move your queen to f5. Okay, so queen f5. And let's say if black plays rook e7, you can move your bishop out, and after rook e8, you can simply castle, and you have the same idea. You want to play rook h1 check. So let's go back and see what happened in the game. In the game, after queen g5, black played bishop f8. So guys, already you got the advantage, so you need to maintain your advantage or increase your advantage, right? So here you can capture the pawn on g6, bishop takes g6, queen takes g6 check, and here black played bishop g7. But if black doesn't block, and let's say if black moves the king to h8, you can move the bishop to g5. Your plan is to take that knight, and if the bishop moves here, you castle again. You're familiar with this plan, right? You saw this move a lot, and you know that the idea is to transfer the rook to the king side. Okay, and this is totally winning for you. So let's go back and see the real game here. After queen takes g6, let's say black moves the bishop to g7. Now you can play bishop g5, the same idea. You want to go for a long castle. King f8. Let's say black unpins the bishop. You can play bishop c4. I mean, you could even castle here. So here you have different ways to win, because you already got a winning position. And yeah, bishop c4, long castle, both of them are working here. Okay, so in the game, white played bishop c4. The idea is to checkmate the king in just one move. So black played queen e7 to cover this square, and then white castled here. Black played b5, and then white played bishop b3. White moved the bishop back. Black played c5, and white took the pawn. In this position, I mean, you have a lot of moves to win, but he took the pawn. Black played rook a d8, and here white played knight d4. But this position is kind of interesting, because the computer found a move. I was analyzing this position with computer, you know, and I found a move that computer says it's plus 65 pawns. Can you imagine that? It was plus 65, and I was just in awe, you know. So the move was rook d6, and apparently after rook d6, white is plus 65 pawns. I mean, that is just insane. But yeah, this is how chess works. So basically, you're putting pressure on f6, and there's no way to defend the position, because let's say if he takes your rook, you're gonna take, and if the queen takes, you have this beautiful checkmate, and the queen cannot defend the knight and this pawn at the same time, unless if he wants, you know, to sacrifice the queen, which you can easily take the queen. But if he, for example, moves the queen to d7, now you can take here, and notice that the king is trapped. The queen blocks, and you get a wonderful checkmate, right? Okay, guys, so this was the opening trap. I was really excited to see this trap, to be honest with you, because I was struggling with this opening. Everyone was playing this on chess.com in blitz games, because it's easy to play as black, you know, the pawn structure, the moves are kind of, you know, typical. But if you know this trick, you can win in your games. I hope that you like this video, and I'm sure that you can use these traps in your own games. Please use them in your own games, and remember the move orders and the ideas in this game that I showed you. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. And thank you for watching. I'll see you soon. Take care.